At dawn on December 26th, 1st Division forces, but not our 3rd Battalion, were landed on Yellow Beach 1 and Yellow Beach 2 on the western side of the island, several miles south of Cape Gloucester. The password for D-Day was Guadalcanal. The Japanese airdrome there was the first objective. Because the island was over 370 miles long and 40 miles wide, and enemy positions unconfirmed, my battalion, 3-5, was held in reserve as Combat Team 35, Amoeba Force, McDougal Group, until January 1st, when the situation could be reassessed. We were considered an elite force, capable of handling anything they threw at us, so it's not surprising we were set aside for a few days as an ace in the hole. We had a war correspondent attached to us, and we heard him complain that he would have no story to tell with a reserve unit. An officer told him not to worry. The 3rd Battalion would plug the biggest hole on Cape Gloucester. The men landing on the day after Christmas faced combat landing and soon thereafter an immense storm, with deadly lightning strikes and even an earthquake. By New Year's Eve, it had been determined that the enemy was massed in an area called Burgin Bay, to the south of the initial perimeter. Our unit, reinforcing the 7th Regiment, was to advance to Burgin Bay and clear the enemy. We went ashore on Yellow Beach 2. No combat landing was needed there now, and moved inland and took up positions alongside what would become known as Suicide Creek. Our battalion spread out across a 500-yard line. Slowly, painstakingly, we cut our way through the vine-matted underbrush. The Japanese we were advancing against were the 141st Infantry Regiment, a veteran group of their soldiers cited for bravery on Bataan. They had been on New Britain since early December and were dug into their invisible redoubts. Their snipers were hidden high in the canopy, 200 feet above our heads. The main body of the Japanese infantry was entrenched on Aguirre Ridge, a jungle rise hidden by dense foliage. We had no idea where it was, but captured Japanese intelligence suggested they considered it a key defense point. Our ultimate goal was to take this ridge and command the heights. Between our position and the ridge lay a small, winding creek that was not on any of the maps. Sometimes 15 feet across, the creek was only 2 or 3 feet deep. What posed a serious problem was its precipitous banks, at some places 20 feet high. On the far side of the banks, the Japanese were dug in deeply, waiting in camouflaged pillboxes and machine gun emplacements, all positioned so as to give them interlocking fields of fire on both the creek and the banks. It was an untenable situation, but there was nothing to do but cross that creek. When we reached the creek, one by one, Marines began sliding down the banks, their rifles held high over their heads. And one by one, they were picked off by snipers. Those still on the banks retrenched. Those clinging to the muddy walls of the creek took cover under fallen trees, unwilling to retreat without their dead. Slim took out the first Japanese rifleman of the battle. We made a second charge with more success, and Marines began scrambling onto the Japanese-held banks, but now their machine guns and snipers opened up. There was no place to hide from the snipers, and our platoon got mixed up among others. Lieutenant Andrew Dykstra was leader of the 1st Platoon of K Company. How he and I came to be side by side, I never knew. Suddenly he cried out, "T.I., I'm hit, I'm hit." I glanced over and saw that his entire elbow had been shot away. I reached for my first aid pack and found I had only a compress. No sulfa powder to go into the wound, nothing to tie it up with. I stretched out his arm as best I could, bandaged it with the compress, and cut 2 small pieces of wood for splints. I used my mosquito net to secure them. We were pinned down, but across the stream I could see movement. I thought this would be a good time to cross, and I stood up and yelled, "Let's go, men!" I jumped down the bank and into the water. Bullets began to burst around me, shredding the leaves from the trees. I looked to my right and to my left. No one had followed me. The Japanese counterattack had started just as I had jumped into the stream, and the other men had had no time to jump. I scrambled back up the bank and found cover behind a rotten log.